Welcome everyone to episode 3 of Warcraft Rumblers, a competitive strategy podcast dedicated to Blizzard's hot new mobile game, Warcraft Rumble. I'm Brian, this is my co-host Dylan. Dylan, today we are going to talk about dungeons and heroics and things that people continue to need to know and maybe getting wrong. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. You actually asked this time. I really appreciate that. Yeah, doing well, having a good time, still playing Warcraft Rumblers. Well, Warcraft Rumble. We are Warcraft
We're
Rumblers.
the Rumblers.
So all is well. Yeah, you doing
Excellent.
swell?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm doing really good because I feel like it's a new season, which is cool. I started playing after you, which we talked about in episode 1, and so the way that guilds work, when you join a guild, you just will get any of the rewards at the top if the guild has those unlocked. So a lot of people that are being really helpful at the end of the season saying, hey, come join our guild and get at least these top rewards. But there are those tomes that you only get if you're in the guild and earn the progress, if you're there while the guild earns progress towards them. So I
Yeah.
started playing late, and so I kind of joined a guild and then wanted to stay there to try and get those tomes. But it's a new season now, so I'm in your guild now, which is awesome
Yeah.
because I trust that we can work together towards these rewards, and we will be able to raid together, which is really cool because you have to be in a guild, I think, to raid together, they've said. So I'm really excited about that. I really wanted to end up in your guild. Um, and I get to see that. Did you know that you only have like 3 more sigils than me now?
Yeah, you are cruising, dude. I have definitely kind of come to a halt because it's just a lot of work, it's a lot of effort and just like remembering things because that's what this game is. It's just a puzzle at the end of the day that's very, very challenging the higher you
So,
get.
so I wanted to posit a theory to you. In the last episode, we talked about clearing heroics horizontally or vertically. And
Yeah.
so vertically is saying like you have one faction or one leader that's like a super over leveled deck, and so what you do is you just go through and crush a heroic mission with that
Mm.
leader or faction, get the tome, and then do the next one with that same deck. And so what it looks like in the app. Um, is that you can see several missions all cleared by the same faction. And there's
Mm.
some advantages to doing that because if you have a really strong deck, you're converting that into all those cards, right? All that XP for your minis, which is really nice. But there's some disadvantages. And so the disadvantages is you're not doing this mission again and again. You do it and move on.
Yeah.
And so my theory is that early on for the early heroics, it's probably better to clear them vertically because you'll probably, when you're just getting to this point, have large disparities in the strengths of your
Mm.
decks based on which decks you've been able to bring into the dungeon and which cards you've invested in early.
No, that makes a
Um,
lot of sense. Yeah, you'll have that one deck that is significantly stronger than the rest of them, so it makes sense to just run it vertically and go as far as you can and then catch up eventually.
and then
Good.
there's a turning point
Yes,
where
exactly.
once you get extra more factions into the dungeon. I talked about in the last episode how the first dungeon I got in, and I just got kind of my Blackrock decks all bronze, so
Yeah.
barely into the dungeon. And then the next dungeon I got a deck that's mostly silver, so I was able to push further into heroics with undead than I could with Blackrock. But it gets to a point like when the Beast Dungeon was here, Old Murkai, I was able to get a full gold deck because Old Murkai, I had the talent,
So
just
sick.
busted. He lined up really well with that dungeon. I think you and I talked strategy. So all of a sudden, I was able to get like 15 or 20 heroics deeper with Old Murkai and than anything else. And so that got me just doing that got me so much material for my
Yeah.
collection. And then eventually, now that it's like Horde Week, I was kind of able to backfill all these missions that I had everything, but there's a vertical gap where I don't have Horde because my Grommash is level 13, and my average Old Murkai in that deck is like the Old Murkai deck is like level 18. So it's just
Yeah.
it's a different. They're playing a different sport. Um,
Right, and I think, that makes sense like we're saying, you want to be able to beat these heroics, so you're going to use your higher level decks, but I think we've touched on in the past, it's in the long term, it's kind of the worst way to play it because every heroic level is very specific on how you need to beat it, and it has like a very unique uh, change to its level than it was in its original form. So if you have that fresh in your mind, you can play all of your decks that, assuming that they're the right level and kind of build around that same strategy across the board. So
Exactly.
horizontal is definitely the smarter way.
Well, so my theory is that vertical is better early on, but after maybe like 100 sigils or something, I think horizontal becomes better
Yeah.
because the fights become so difficult and you have to be so strategic with the card choices and how you play them that it's really advantageous to play that fight again. Like right when you beat it with a leader is the best time. Strike when the iron's hot. Pick a different leader from a different faction. Create the same deck or as close to it as makes
Yeah.
sense based on deck slots. You might need to spend 250 Arclight energy, which I think is well worth it to
Yeah,
adjust
it's
a few of your
nothing. You get
slots.
so much of that.
These later heroic missions, I just think it's so advantageous to do them horizontally because the skill jump between each one is so high that trying to do it vertically is just not really going to yield much anyway. The point of doing it vertically, like you only really vertically clear if you're like, oh crap, like I should have done this months ago, or not months, but I should have done this a long time ago, because if I'm able to just smash through doing this stuff vertically, you're just leaving material on the table by not doing that stuff.
Right.
Which I find not to be smart. I want to ask you, how much do you feel like for these heroic missions that like you can just like use the same, like once you beat it with these 6 minis and this leader, you can just take those 6 minis and play them with a different leader? Like, how much do you find that to be the case?
Sometimes. I mean, like you were saying, if you have a gold slot that fits them all, and they can be the same level, like for sure, it makes a lot of sense that you could do it. But sometimes the leader is so different from another leader that it doesn't really mesh as well as, like Jaina is very different than Rend Blackhand. They're both leaders, they're different costs, they're different everything. So it wouldn't really make sense to run the same uh, list of minis or set of minis, but it's not impossible.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah,
I think it really depends on the mission,
for sure.
um, because these heroic missions, this is another thing I want to ask you about, but I feel like I realized just today I had a sort of enlightenment that, or an epiphany is the word I was looking for, that starts with an E and is hard to say, that I don't play these heroic missions nearly aggressive enough. I'll find myself, because there are missions where you need to play defensive at all costs, like from the word go. Like there are missions where, not like, this is a trick also, where sometimes being defensive at all costs from the start isn't even defensive enough. What you have to do is hit play and then pause it right away, so you have a second for your hand to load, so that you can actually be playing from 3:30 on the clock or 3:29 on the clock, instead of like, oh, 3:26 on the clock, finally the game wants to show you your hand and you know what minis you have.
Yeah.
Um, but there are missions where it's like I'm playing defensive and then slowly getting overwhelmed over the course of a minute or two, and then on like my ninth attempt, I'm thinking it's a long defensive battle. I just somehow, like, things go magically my way, and 20 seconds in, I magically have this push and I win in under a minute. And I'm like, oh wait, if I just like played aggressive, I didn't know it was possible to win in 30 seconds. And then like it's a heroic, so with a different leader, I now build with that in mind of like I actually can just win in 30 seconds instead
Yeah.
of the long defensive slog that I thought I had to participate in. And so it just then snowballs.
But that
But
feels very rare,
yes, I think that's
in my
true. I
opinion.
I think there are a few missions. There's the mission with it depends on the mechanic of the level and how quickly it will kill you, and what the boss is throwing at you at the start. Like, because
Hmm.
most of the time there will be one, at least one, a starting push, whether it's just like a wolf backed up by some murlocs, or it is a Stonehoof Tauren, or something that's maybe 3 to 5 gold just pushing at your base. So if you have something that defends that, oftentimes that might buy you the first minute of not spending another gold on defense. So there's a mission with the bog creepers where they come out of the tar pits, where that boss can just be killed very quickly. The
Hmm.
boss does single target attacks. This is a huge one. If the boss, even on heroic, only does a single target attack, that's very rare, first of all. So if you can get it turned around, attacking a tank that has the right defense for it, whether that is resistance or armored, um, you get some poison harpies with bloodlust, that boss is just dead. It's
Melted.
very fast. So if you hold
Yeah.
off the first defensive push, you don't have to play any of this map control game. You don't even have to play your miner. Um, Especially if you use the trick that we've talked about where you switch around cards in the deck slots so that you
Yeah.
have them in your starting hand in the order you want. That is an example of one, and I believe there are several missions where once you figure out the mechanic, you can often just cheese it. In some fights, it's not cheesing it at the start, but you actually cheese it like once you cause like a phase change or something. I recently broke through against the Cairne Bloodhoof mission where it's on heroic. He like resurrects and summons like 3 copies of himself, and so those 3 copies like push on all the lanes, and it's hard to defend all that. And then it's overtime, and you don't have time to kill Cairne. But what I realized is like I can just with unbound troops kill Cairne, and I don't have to kill those copies of him.
Mm.
Like I was playing this slow game. All right, I have to control all the towers so that I have the most time to slow them down when they push all the. It's like no, just like be ready, have max gold when I kill him the first time, and then when he respawns, turn him around with with an Earth Elemental, unbound tank, armored, really nice.
Dude,
You
Earth
know,
Elemental's so good.
get a safe pilot shooting him in the back. Use
Yeah.
execute. Use safe, like I already said, safe pilot. Use well bigs over the top, Quillbore, and so I was able to like kill him before his copies even made it off his platform. And so that's, I guess, just aggression doesn't always have to be like the tar pit one where we can actually just cheese it and ignore the mechanics. Um, can you think of some other like ways that you win that are like aggressive that maybe people aren't really doing? Maybe combinations of cards that'll just like kill a boss, or like a really fast way to take a tower. Like, yeah.
Well, like you mentioned on last episode, Huntress with any form of tank is just unbelievable. With like, especially an unbound tank with Earth
Mm-hmm.
Elemental or Quillbore, whatever. If you keep her alive, specifically in PvP where they have the dragon towers, it's just game over. But besides that, I mean, can't really think of something that's like rushing the boss besides what you already kind of mentioned. When it's available, go for it.
Do you find yourself playing aggressively for gold? Like doing something like, oh, I'm going to send this Quillbore, which costs 2 gold, to take that chest, which gives me 2 gold, even though I know
Mm.
the Quillbore is going to die. And the
Well,
only
yeah, but
thing I get
then
is,
you're taking it from your opponent, right? The only time I really play aggressively for gold is PvP, because if you're not going for it, then they are, and you're inherently at a huge disadvantage. And to beat that, you either have to be much better than them at the game, have higher levels, something, or just have a deck that really counters what they're playing. But in PvP, I think it's more critical than any other game mode to be on top of the gold and being the one that's always capturing that because you're always at an advantage.
yeah, it almost feels like, in Call of Duty playing like domination or something like that, where it's like you control points on the map, and the every 10 seconds it pays out based on, our team controls 2, your team only controls 1, so we're making progress towards, we're getting victory points or something. It feels like that, where if you're controlling the sections of the map where the gold mines are or the chests spawn, you're getting paid out victory points in the form of extra gold to get extra troops, and it really just snowballs. Um,
Yeah.
which I'm realizing this is fitting because the current PvP map is called Arathi Basin, and Arathi Basin was like a domination type game mode, super fun in World of Warcraft. How do you feel about the new PvP map? For those that don't know, hopefully we can either have a picture, we'll have some gameplay of it next to us here while we're talking. The new PvP map, it still has dragon towers, and I believe it still has the modifier that is like increasing tower health as well. So it's really just, it's all about the dragon towers. But the new map doesn't have any chests, if I'm correct. Sorry,
Yeah.
fans of Sneed. And it has 2 gold mines in the middle, and then 2 more gold mines that are kind of just off on the side by each person's secondary tower, if I recall. How do you feel about this new PvP map, Dylan?
I think it's more fun than the last one. Maybe that's just because it's kind of fresh right now, but I really like it. I like that the center area has two mineable rocks right there. If somehow you're sending in the dark iron miner, what's it called?
Dark Iron Miner. It's probably
Dark iron
still
miner.
very good on this in this PvP map.
He's really good because if you
Yeah.
send him to that area and you somehow keep him alive with, safe pilot, some other unbound troop you can tank for, you're gonna constantly be owning that area and constantly be getting more gold. But also it's really critical to play the left lane and get the tower on the other side, the first tower,
Oh, it's actually
because
important to take your opponent's tower now?
I think so on the left because there's another mineable rock right there that if you can take the tower, you have immediate access to. So then not only do you have the middle potentially locked down, you have your right tower locked down, and you have the one on the left that started as theirs. So you can constantly be getting gold.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is exactly like Arathi Basin or World of Warcraft. I'm a huge fan of that. I do have up here now, by the way, Dark Iron Miner. We talked about this in episode 2. Specifically with the gold mine talent, this dude is a workhorse in PvP. The gold mine, after mining, it drops a proximity mine, which damages nearby enemies when touched when they detonate it. That is strong enough to kill the enemy Kobold miner, and it drops it
Hmm.
right next to the mine. So it's a no-win situation for your opponent, and it's an all-win situation for you because they need to send a unit to detonate this mine. Otherwise, that gold mine is just off limits for their kobold miners for the rest of the game. If they
Yeah.
send their own dark iron miner, which they probably have because it's PvP, it's going to arrive and the mines are going to go off. It's going to maybe be 2/3 health, which could really change a duel against a safe pilot or against a huntress. This dude actually is pretty good against the huntress, by the way, because he does physical damage. Um, I know that Dylan, that you told me off show that you have the wrong talent for dark iron miner. Which
Well, so
one do
I
you
kind of
have?
take that back actually. A
Oh,
lot of
really?
people say that this is another good one. It's Dark Iron Armaments, where after you mine 1 gold, you get the armored talent. So armor reduces physical damage, right? Um, if you get that, the opponent actively has to spend a lot of gold to defeat your Iron Miner because he becomes like a mini tank.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, he doesn't do that much damage, but when he's armored, he just lasts that much longer and can get that many more hits off, and it just makes him a lot more strong. Um, it kind of is the opposite of what the proximity mine one is.
Mm-hmm.
Proximity mine, it makes that more defensive. Like no one can go in the area anymore. With dark iron armaments, he kind of becomes an offensive unit that can progress your push a little bit more than if he didn't have the armor trait. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and what's really interesting about Dark Iron Armaments is if it triggers after the first gold that you get, is it makes it more likely that you'll be able to get the second gold as well if
Mm.
something that's doing physical damage is attempting to stop him. And armored and resistant or resistance are really important,
Yeah.
especially in PvE. Lining that up and having that, like, there'll be missions where I'm struggling for hours, and then one time I properly time, like using my quill board to catch the attention of an ogre mage that's been wiping out my harpies or whelps for hours and ruining me. One time I time it properly of just here's my resistant tank that distracts your mage, and this whole army pushes, and oh hey, the boss is dead.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I'm terrible at this game. That doing the thing right once it took me 3 hours to do it right once. But beating heroic missions is you have to do a whole bunch of little things right all in a row, all on one attempt. um
Yeah, and understanding the core kind of traits of the game, like armored and like resistant, is critical. I mean, I still feel like I question if I understand everything correctly, um, but it's certainly better than it was in the beginning, where I legit had no idea what anything was.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there are definitely still units that might have some of these traits, like armored or resistant, that people don't really realize. And so you might sort of think like, oh, that enemy unit is like super OP, but maybe you just didn't realize that like it's armored and it does less damage than you think because it's more of a tank than you think, and you've been
Hmm.
approaching it wrong. Like you've
Yeah.
been trying to kill it because you think it does a bunch of damage, but actually like you just need to wait, cycle to your magic damage, whelps or whatever. They'll shred it. You can let it hit your tower. I'm really thinking of what's called the tank that has the mace. Normally, I'm the one that knows the card names. Um,
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Shoot. The Knoll Brute.
yeah, Null Brute. I knew it was a type of brute. I wanted to say Ogre Brute, but I knew it wasn't an Ogre. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Null Brute, which we can see here. This was a card that I leaned on heavily in my first week playing the game, and then
Me
haven't really
too.
touched it since.
Yeah.
I've heard that the Rabid trait is good, reduce deploy cost by one and gain the cycle trait. I've heard
Yeah, I
that the
have that
Rabid
one.
talent is good. I've also heard that Thick Hide is good. I could see this card definitely having PvE applications. I could see this card having dungeon relevance specifically. with either of those talents, depending on the dungeon and the faction. It's a beast. I feel like there aren't that many good beasts. Yet there are, beast slots for those leaders and in the decks, and there are beasts that care about having other beasts. And so for that reason, I'm not fully out on the Null Brute. Yeah, so we were talking about PvP, and we were talking about the Dark Iron Miner, which I think is a card that we highlighted in the last episode as a powerful PvP card. The PvP cards we highlighted in the last episode as being good. We talked about Huntress, the Prowler, Dark Iron Miner, Safe Pilot, and there was one other one that we talked about as being really important that I can't remember right now.
Did you say Quillbore?
Oh, and Quillbore. Yeah, we talked about Quillbore, and then the 6th card is Sword of Flex. And the reason for all these kind of cards, Huntress was really important because the Dragon Towers just can't touch it. The Prowler is really important because it's a way to profitably kill a Huntress. And it's a way to have physical damage, which is nice. Dark Iron Miner, I think, is still good. I think Huntress and the Prowler. Do you think the Huntress is still good? I mean, Huntress, Dragon Towers. You just told me, I think Huntress is even better because you just told me it's more important to take the side tower. On the last map, which I think was Altruic Valley, the side tower I feel like was very not important.
It was irrelevant.
It was really hard to take.
Yeah.
And putting a Huntress there compared to sending a Huntress over and up and across the bridge, you just want your Huntress on the map longer than that to just send your Huntress there. There was one game where I accidentally sent my Huntress there, and I don't think my opponent or I realized it, and the Huntress took the tower, and that was how I won. And then
it's helpful when you have that available to spawn troops from because it's right next to the main tower. But now it's much more important, like you were saying, to take that left lane, get access to that gold mine. But yeah, Huntress is still really good. Until they change from the Dragon Towers, she's going to be elite. Anything with range is going to be really good.
And so that means that the Prowler is still good. The Prowler is really nice because it's a fast tank. So oftentimes, like, you'll have fast units, and then they run out in front of your Abomination or your Gargoyle, whatever your tank is. So that's one of the reasons the Prowler is really nice. And the way it lines up profitably and will kill an enemy Huntress. So that's still good.
I think he's good, but he dies really fast to the Dragon Towers. But that's not really his purpose. He's not the troop to take out the
exactly.
The towers.
I think he's to control the middle and possibly to play defense and mostly to counter the enemy Huntress. Although the Prowler is taking a hit because he was for chest control to kill those chests.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
And so for that reason, we also think the Quillbore is a little bit step back, right? Maybe not.
And Quillbore will always be good. He's just all around, a 2-drop tank that can be placed anywhere on the map. That's really good. But he certainly took a hit with this new map because there is no chest. And you can no longer place troops behind in the back corners of your enemy's main tower, which means you can't tank and have the Dragon Tower go that way and attack from the other direction. It's going to hit no matter what's in front of the
So is it 180 degree? Can you still do the sides, or is it only in front?
It's just the front line.
So it's really restricted from what it used to be.
It's really restricted.
All right, I'll
because
check
that's how, I mean,
that.
I'm guilty of it myself. I cheese so many PvPs by dropping, like, maybe even a Quillbore and an Earth Elemental with whatever was already coming at it from the front. There's just almost nothing they can do. There's nothing they can do. But that strategy actually got worse when Dragon Towers became a thing, because tanks just get melted the closer they are to the Dragon Tower.
Even the resistant ones, even Quillbore once it gets close. But it buys a lot of time for the Safe Pilot, which then even on its own would have a lot of time because it's like max range is getting tickled by the Dragon Tower.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's generally healthy. What about playing cards behind the side tower? Can I play my Quillbore, can I get kind of fancy with where I play my Quillbore relative to the side tower on this PvP map?
That's in the middle of the map, so anything goes there.
Okay.
They just took away the ends.
The base tower. I think that's fair. So Quillbore probably taking a pretty big step back. I think Safe Pilot is still just elite because this map is going to be... I really think the map's going to be about... I'm guilty. I haven't played yet, but I think the map's going to be about controlling that gold island in the center. So that means kind of zone control cards, which Safe Pilot is... Maybe Quillbore is just an unbound tank that gets up in there. But I could see Earth Elemental being better than Quillbore because the second thing I think this map is going to be about is about taking those side towers.
Yeah.
Because before on Alteric Valley, which to me was like the PvP map because that was the map when I started playing, and it was that map for 2 or 3 weeks. But I mean, it's going to rotate. But that's my initial impression. The side towers weren't important because there were no gold there. They were of minimal importance compared to how important it was to control the middle and the bridge and pressure your opponent's base by cheesing in the back and all this.
Right.
So I could see Earth Elemental having that siege element replacing Quilboar because we're going to put more effort into taking side towers or defending side towers. Can you think of any cards that maybe weren't among that list? They weren't of those 5 or 6 like key PvP cards, but now might become really good in PvP?
Well, this one also, the one that I'm thinking was also pretty good in the last map because it also had Dragon Towers, but the Darkspear Troll with a
Ooh,
20% regen every second,
I got
I
that. Yeah.
think lives endlessly
Yeah,
if
you're right. If
yeah,
it's
if
at
he's
full
just getting
range.
hit. Yeah.
Hmm.
If he's just getting hit by the Dragon Tower at the very tail end of it, it won't do more than 20% health damage, so he'll constantly, or per second, he'll constantly be regenning and he'll never die. And it'll make your opponent have to respond to it.
I think that's a really reasonable card that is interesting to try. And people were doing it. You're right. It's really good at Dragon Towers. So that is an element of the PvP that didn't rotate. So the way PvP
Yeah.
works, and I'll record myself
Why don't
showing
you
this
pull up
off.
Darkspear Troll real quick?
Um, yeah, I'll pull up Darkspear Troll real quick. We can take a
But say
look
what
at
you were
that.
saying. Sorry.
The way the PvP works is there's like 3 elements that combine. So there's the map, the towers, and then a modifier. Um, but first, we have Darkspear Troll here. This is the most popular talent by far. Big Bad Voodoo. Regenerate 20% health every second. I think the other 2 talents, at least one of them, Serpent Sting, I believe, has PvE relevance at a minimum. And I could see this having PvP relevance, just gain poison. The concern here is that poison is really stronger in numbers. We talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but my understanding is that poison stacks up to 8 times, and then each time it's reapplied, it like damages um, as if you're stacked at 8 times. It
Mm.
deals damage to you. So those harpies, once you got 3 harpies, once they each hit you 3 times, every hit is doing the physical damage hit, but it's also applying like 8 pops of the poison damage, 8 stacks worth of poison damage. And then once they die for 8 more seconds, you're taking 8 stacks, 8 hits worth of poison.
Mm.
So a single instance of poison is meaningless. That's why the relic in the dungeons, your minis poison when they die. If that's your only source of poison, and it's not going to be very good because it will do to the enemies, 1 tick of poison every 8 seconds, which is what max poison does. You're doing in 8 seconds what max poison does in 1 second, but is also attached to the physical damage part of a harpy attack, while 2 other harpies are also attacking. So we think of harpies attacking a boss when we think of how strong poison is. But if the Darkspear Troll is your only source of poison, and I could see them introducing a leader in the future that cares about poison, which would be cool. It could maybe be, I'm not sure how you do that. Maybe, like how Cairne is like your horde units get plus 20% health. You could have your poison is stronger, or when an enemy poison unit dies, you generate a gold. That'd be kind of cool. Like when
Yeah, that'd be sick.
when an enemy unit dies while poisoned, or you could do something like when an enemy unit dies, the nearest ally unit is healed. Like we heal off of killing with poison. So I could see poison becoming more relevant in the future, but right now, outside of harpies, which are just hella strong and basically exploiting it,
Yeah.
I don't think Serpent Sting is particularly good. Headhunting, I believe, is just a bad talent. I would think it's just bait. It's just not really going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Does nothing for me.
So back to new cards that I think will be good if we're thinking about pressuring the tower and controlling the middle. I could see cards like Flame Waker or Pyromancer. They just they're ranged and they're AoE. You mentioned if you're ranged, you're good. I could just see this being a scrap all about this middle island and the gold island. But if you overcommit to the gold island, I'm going to go take your tower. That's like how these map domination things work, and that's how Arathi Basin worked. Was if you overcommit here, I'm going to go over here and take this thing, and then now I have this, and you've overcommitted, so you have the middle temporarily, but I can get that back now that I have the sides. My economy is going to be better long term. Something I think is going to be really important in controlling the middle is timing the gold. Do you do that? Are you aware of how long it takes for a gold vein to regenerate a charge? And then do you time based on that sometimes?
I have a general understanding. If I sent my Kobold down a lane and he hit the mine for a little bit, and then I cycle my deck all the way around back to the Kobold again, I'm thinking to myself, hey man, maybe check these mines and see how many have, or how many there are on there, and by the time your new Kobold gets down there, they're probably going to regen another time. So I don't have the specific amount of time it takes, but I definitely think about it as I'm playing,
My
and you kind of
under-
have to.
my understanding is that it's every 30 seconds, and so
Is
on
one?
every 30 seconds, one gold charges, and so what you can see, and the way you can kind of see this, the way I've reached this conclusion is on maps where the gold doesn't start out fully charged everywhere. Generally, the game starts with 3:30 on the clock. Generally, around 3 minutes, maybe 2:58, 2:59 on the clock, all the gold mines will get a fresh charge. And then around 2:30, they'll get another one. And around 2 minutes, they'll get another one. But the timing isn't just based on the clock, because if a gold mine is fully charged and sitting there for a minute, 2 minutes, some odd amount of seconds, when you go and mine the first gold, that's like when it starts the 30-second timer to. So it won't start its 30-second timer, I don't believe, if it is fully charged. And so I think that you'll be able to, in PvP, if either one of you gets your Kobold in and just goes, mine this one twice, mine this one 3 times. You think about, in about 30 seconds, they're both going to get, this one's going to get a charge, and then 5-10 seconds later, that one's going to charge. In about a minute, or in about a minute and a half, they're both going to be fully recharged again. So you can think about when it is worth trying to fight over the middle based upon when the gold is going to regenerate. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, this is PvE relevant. Something I'll find is you'll have a map where there's, 2 different routes to send your Kobold miner, right? If I'm thinking of the map where I'm fighting Cairne, where on the left there is the long straightaway where there's 2 mines, and then on the right there's just like a single mine, and then that pathway crosses under, but there's no way for it to reach the other mines. So you're mostly alternating where you play your Kobold. The first Kobold down the left, second Kobold on the right, third Kobold down the left, fourth Kobold on the right, just because those are the 2 routes to mine. Yeah. How often are you playing your Kobold? Like, you're holding the Kobold until it's going to get max gold. Like, I'm not going to send this Kobold down the left until it's going to get 3 from the front and 3 from the back. Versus,
I pretty
like,
rarely do that.
You rarely
I pretty rarely
hold
do
it.
that. I play it when it makes sense. Sometimes I'll even play it as a cycle card to get a little bit more time to play my next the next mini in my deck and like get my gold from 9 to 10 again. It's just, I mean, it depends really, but I mostly play it just when I have to. But I also play it on chess, not just solely on the mining.
Yeah,
It's
very
really
interesting.
slow, but it works.
Sometimes that can be to your advantage because you can get the best of both worlds. You can get it in the cycle when you want it in the cycle. And it's a cheap card to get towards the better cards, the critical cards in the deck. And then it'll spend like 10 seconds taking a chest, which hopefully will give enough time. I mean, 10 seconds is 1/3 of a gold charging. If, like I said, it charges about every 30 seconds. Some of these missions, though, I feel like I do just kind of like play it. Like, I'll be like, oh, here's my Kobold in cycle. Oh, okay, there's 1 gold vein here. So I'll play the Kobold, it mines 1. And then it like walks past, and the thing recharges right when it's out of range. Versus if I hold this to get the second one, now I'm profiting. It might be worth holding it. Do you know, like, how often are you playing like your cheap cycle, like the cheapest cycle? You're only really playing 5 cards in your deck. Like, you're like, this is my key card, and then here are my 4 cheap cards, and I'm playing the key card again. And those other cards are mostly just sitting there. Like, I've found sometimes I'll play a whole mission with like an abomination that I never have time to play.
Yeah, definitely. I have games where I literally just don't play a card, and I don't know when that's going to happen. I don't know why that's going to happen. It's just a situational matchup that I find myself against, and it's like, hey, this card doesn't fit into the flow of the game right now, unless my opponent is also doing that and decides to play his card that's kind of off-brand in that matchup. Then you might be looking at playing yours. But it is interesting that some matchups you just completely ignore one of your cards.
I think it can often be the leader that gets totally ignored, because maybe you're doing a heroic mission where you're really relying on your 6 minis that you're choosing that aren't your leader to do the strategy and execute it, and the leader's just not relevant. And oftentimes leaders are expensive, and if it's under leveled because it's that heroic situation, like I'm not going to spend six gold to play a under leveled rend when I can just play these properly leveled minis that cost less. Especially because sometimes I might not even have flyers. I'm just doing this because if I'm embarrassed by what level my rend is, my general Drakaseth is even more embarrassing. Very excited for Horde Week, by the way, that I finally got the final leader. I was missing Cairne. Cairne has been quite fun. So that's been cool. That just came to mind. So I have all the leaders now.
Cairne's awesome.
Yeah, Cairne has been sweet. Seems good in PvE. Seems a little not great in PvP, but I could see him actually getting a huge boost in PvP, because if it's about controlling that gold island, he's tanky, has the AoE. It's a lot of zone control. If you either put a shaman healing him or have the resurrection talent, I could see Cairne being really powerful in the current PvP meta as a leader.
Yeah, it's just whelp eggs and harpies are so common, and they destroy him. I love whelp eggs with the talent that does damage upon hatching. It takes out.
No, it's so good. It's so good.
What's that card? Like the witch, not the witch, but
The necromancer.
The necromancer. It completely deletes a necromancer. That's a 3 for 5 trade-off right there.
And it leaves some whelps around. There's so many things it trades so profitably with. It's so good, and about half of heroics, like your strategy is going to revolve around whelp eggs. Either using cheat death on the whelp eggs, or maybe the enemy has, Stonehoof Tauren, and it's like you just play the whelp eggs. In the current dungeon, which I think is Deadmines, there's a stealth Stonehoof Tauren that walks down like a pipe that like your troops can't walk on, but if you just play whelp eggs there, the Stonehoof Tauren will unstealth itself to attack the whelp eggs and then dies to the whelps. Yeah, that's a very what is that, Mr. Smythe? It's a very tough mission, but so we answered a question, right? Because we were wondering if the factions would be like locked to the same dungeons or whatever. And Deadmines was the first dungeon I played with Blackrock about a month ago, and so now we're back in Deadmines with Horde, which makes me think when it's Blackrock week. Next week or whenever it's going to be, when it's Blackrock week soon, it probably won't be Deadmines, because I doubt we'll go to Deadmines 2 weeks in a row. Do you have any suggestions for Deadmines or for playing Horde in the dungeon? Can you tell us maybe some Horde specific relics that you think are really strong? Any thoughts on that?
Not really. I mean, I like playing a lot with Cairne, and I like playing a lot with Gromosh. Sneed is the one that's going to be kind of a pain to play with. He'll be fine. Like, he's a good tank and he does some good damage, but he's just not really fit for really anything. I mean, he's just Sneed, man.
Yeah, fortunately, the Deadmines has chests. There are not chests on the first level, which is the hardest fight, I think, in the Deadmines, Mr. Smite, just because he gets all those free troops that are stealthed and he doesn't have to spend gold, and he plays other troops. But on level 2, there are 2 chests right at your base that Sneed will take, which is super good. And then on level 3, there's a chest right by your base as well, which is nice.
3 is so difficult. Let's talk about that for a second. What is the mechanic, right? He spawns his troops, and when they go over the duplicator thing, whatever goes over the duplicator, he controls.
So the Sneed fight has the 2 duplicator pads, and when it's sparkling, you'll see it kind of start to charge up, but when it's fully sparkling, the next time a troop steps on it, that troop is destroyed, and then Sneed will spit out under his control like 6 copies of it. So the duplicator only spits out in one spot, and there's a bridge right over it and next to it. So what you want to do is play to control that bridge, so that even when they duplicate something good, like a tank, you can take it out with a ranged unit, a Bat Rider, a Darkspear Troll. The Whelps are really good. Harpies are kind of good. There's a distinction between flying units. And some can attack through bridges and some can't. Like Harpies can't attack through a bridge. If they're on top of a bridge and a unit is next to the bridge below them, it will go down and attack them. But if the unit is under the bridge, the Harpies can't bite you through the bridge. But But whelp eggs can spit through a bridge because they don't need to make contact. They have a ranged attack, unlike the Harpies that have a melee range attack, even though they're flying. Harpies are a flying melee unit. So that you'll see Drakes and Rend are like the whelp egg or the whelp, so they can attack through a bridge. Darkspear Troll can attack through a bridge. But Harpies are, I guess, the big one that
yeah,
can't.
That's good to note.
Huntress can attack down through the bridge. So The main way you deal with these pads, first of all, you play aggressively at the left to take the first tower and take the chest, and then eventually they'll spill over into taking the second tower. But you can play unbound units on the pads. You can send your miner up the middle. I actually thought it was being really cute. I'm gonna add in footage of myself doing this. I thought it was being really cute because this map has 2 gold mines. There's one on the bridge right by your base, and then there's one off to the right by the second tower that you can take. And I'm sure that you've noticed this, Dylan, with units where you can, when you go to drop them around your base, there are the sections that are marked off by the lines that designate what path they'll walk down when you play them. And so what you can do is like play a unit in the right section, but so it'll walk down the right lane unimpeded. But play it close enough that if it sees a unit or something in the middle that it's interested in, it'll go there, fight it, and then if it doesn't get too far, it'll actually come back and walk down the lane that you designated when you played it. And so I was being really cute with this map against Sneed with my gold miner, where I was dropping it on the right, but close enough that it would mine that gold right by my base, and then it'd walk off towards the right, towards the second tower where there's a gold mine, right? I thought I was being really smart. But I then had trouble with Sneed, like a whole bunch, like all night, and I couldn't figure it out. And then I finally like watched what happened. And so the miner was mining and then coming back and walking down the right lane. But the way it was turning the path around the corner, and hopefully I can get footage of this, it was turning the path too tightly. So it was then walking up and not seeing the gold mine, which was on the far edge of the map.
Oh, that makes sense.
And I was really struggling with Sneed because you need to send that miner down the middle across the bridge specifically so that it's fodder for the teleportation pads. Because the disintegration pads, because the miner is you'd love for Sneed to get 6 miners. And so I changed my strategy in a way that wasn't ever getting the gold mine on the right, and my miner wasn't crossing the bridge. I was struggling with Sneed all night until I finally saw that this was a stupid thing that wasn't working. So that was very interesting. So that's another thing you can do is play your miners, make sure they go across the whatever. And then eventually when you control the right tower, you can start alternating your miners, and one of your miners mines the thing on the right. Whelp eggs are really good here. Sneed, you can turn him around with an unbound tank, and then your units will just destroy him from behind. Speaking of, I wanted to go back to relics. I found a few horde-specific relics. There's a horde-specific one that summons troops, like the Alliance one that we saw, like the Beast one. When you play a horde unit, it summons a Warsong Grunt at your base. That is pretty interesting. That could be fodder for the teleportation pads as well, which is fine. It's not great to let him copy tanks, but it's anything other than Molten Giant. You don't want to take in your Stonehoof Tarns. You don't want to take in your Cairne or Gromosh. It's really hard to deal with 6 Cairns. If you have the talent where he resurrects, I'm not sure if Sneed's Cairns would resurrect. So that could be pretty frustrating. There's another one that is your horde units when they're near your leader could critically strike to deal double damage. I assume that's really good. And so I've applied this week a strategy we talked about last week, where the first day of the dungeon, you just push through as far as you can get, really, with the leader. And then each week or each day, so today I woke up and I looked and my relics refreshed because they refresh daily. And so my Cairn today at like level 17 had the summon Warsong Grunt relic. And I'm like, all right, that's a good relic. I'll do Cairn. Did a couple levels of Cairn until he only had shitty relics. And so I'm just going to leave Cairn. And I have the rest of the week still. Go to my Sneed. See, he just has shitty relics. I'm not going to play Sneed. I don't want to play Sneed anyway. So it's good to make that progress early in the week. It's good to check it every day. Figure out which relics you think are good. And eventually you can build around your relics too, because it's offering some relics like your poison does double damage and lasts twice as long. So if you're at level 22 and you're stuck, but you have that relic, maybe look and see if you can build a poison deck. Play Abomination with the poison talent. All of a sudden, that's an insane tank. I don't know if that's actually good in Deadmines. It seems fine, but do you have any further thoughts on relics? Are there certain ones that you find yourself picking a lot that you really like? Some of the neutral ones.
Like I said last week, anything that spawns something I think is a really fun mechanic. There is one this week where every time you spawn your leader, you spawn 2 whelps alongside, with not whelp eggs, whelps. So that's really strong, especially if you're using someone like Gromosh who doesn't attack air. He now becomes a multi-talented leader that can take care of air troops and ground troops, and gives him bloodlust because that's his specialty. There's also one that spawns whelp eggs at all of your towers every 8 seconds. That's a fun one. The one you said where they get a chance to do double critical strike is really powerful.
What do you think about your towers apply frost? Skippable.
I think it's skippable because the only way that would become like good really is if it's coming down to you're attacking his main tower, they're attacking your main tower. You're watching the health bars; they're both decreasing at the same time. If they're just slowed a little bit, you have an advantage there. Um,
I think Towers Applying Frost is a nice effect because I believe that Frost reduces attack speed as well as movement speed. And
yeah,
so there can be maps where it's going to be like, all right, I'm going to take this center tower, but then I'm going to struggle to hold it, and so I'm going to have to hold it, and it'll be tough. And so if being able to Frost like a Huntress that is attacking that tower, maybe it means you don't have to spend gold. The Huntress will only take half the tower instead of the whole tower. Um, but just compared to the strength of, your leader summons 2 Spiderlings, or your leader summons 2 Whelps, or I do really like the Whelp eggs at my towers, especially when you're pushing and it's the red difficulty because it's a higher level than you are. There are certain maps where that means you don't have to play defense. That just means you'll build up a bank of Whelp eggs, and then a Prowler is going to come in and kill itself on Whelp eggs, and it's like you just don't have to play defense, and that enables you to win through overwhelming offense, which is really nice. What do you think about the level up stuff? Because there is like playing a squad unit levels up nearby minis, which I've used and I think is okay. And there is like each time you play your leader, it levels up once. Or when you play a cycle mini, the next mini you play is leveled up once. How much do you value this concept of like getting one level up when you're in the dungeon?
I think it's cool. I don't really know how actually efficient it is or how good it is, but I definitely pick it sometimes. And then I forget I picked it.
Yeah, and you
You know,
play a squad mini and you're like, oh crap, and then you
yeah,
change how you're thinking and you start
yeah,
actually playing your unbound minis on top of your troops and you just smash
right.
the boss. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. That happens all the time, and that's like a fun little treat, a fun little surprise. I think it's good. I think it gets the job done, but there are better ones in general, and there are much worse ones in
I was
general.
personally disappointed in your leader gains 10% health every 5 seconds because I'm playing generally weak leaders like old Murkai or Jaina, Maeve. But then I'm running Cairne through this dungeon and Sneed as well. Those two gaining 10% health every 5 seconds because they have armored and they do an AoE attack, and there's going to be a lot of times, and they're slow, which is big, because you might win a fight near your base with a Sneed or Cairn. It gets to half health. By the time it's at the enemy tower on the other side of the map, it might be full health again. And so that
Yeah.
relic, I think maybe just this week in Deadmines with those 2 leaders because they're tanky. I think that relic's a little interesting with tanky leaders, especially if you're looking to have them fill that role, and especially if the maps in the dungeon are lending themselves towards using this thing on defense and then it heals up when it's moving towards offense. Um, yeah, I'm very interested to see how the dungeon thing develops as we circle around a few times. And it's, once we have all gold decks and we're just doing it kind of for gold or for the Arclight energy, I'm curious to see if it like holds interest and people continue to be invested in it. But it'll continue to be an interesting thing to new players.
Yeah.
And there will be a space for educational content as we get these first time like matchups. Like this is the first time since the game released where the Horde is in Deadmines, or this is the first time the Undead is doing Dire Maul. And so people will have specific questions, and they also may add new relics and mix up the relics that are available each time we cycle around.
Right. I just hope we get more unique dungeons soon, because I've already played all these dungeons, and it's not like lazy or like annoying necessarily, but eventually it's gonna be like, all right, let's get some new content because I'm kind of over this one.
Yeah, well,
And
so
I
that
hated playing this one last time.
you didn't like
Uh,
Deadmines because
I mean,
Mr.
it
Smite.
was
Yeah.
fine. It's fun, but the Sneed level and specifically the Tauren that's stealth that comes out from the middle pipe in the other one is just really tough to deal with and frustrating.
Whelpegs,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, Whelpeggs are a good counter for sure.
Yeah, so hopefully the raids will come in, and I think there will be new dungeons as well. Something we didn't talk about. Have you gotten your hands on the new unit yet, the Chimaera?
No,
Yeah, we'll
not
we'll
yet.
get that unlocked through the guild soon. Hopefully by
Yeah.
the next time we record, we can get our hands on it. We'll get some footage. We'll tell you folks our opinion of it. With that, I think we hopefully have provided some value, and we're at a good amount of time to tap out here. Do you have any other thoughts, Dylan? Anything that you want to say? Oh, something I want to talk about in the collection. I want to talk about collection sorting, but maybe I'll attach that in a separate video. We'll talk about that in the next episode. But the
Okay.
collection sorting is not as bad as you think, and there are some quality of life things in there. that are not apparent and not explained. So hopefully we can show those off when we get a chance in the future. We'll talk about that in the next episode or a separate video, like I mentioned. Still no fan mail, so please email us at warcraftrumblers@gmail.com. We'll get some fan mail. We'll have a fan mail segment. I actually honestly didn't check. We might have fan mail. So if you emailed us, we'll read that email in the next episode. I'm sure no one emailed us, but they will in the future because we're asking very nicely. Pretty please email us. Thank you. Dylan, any closing thoughts?
No, I just hope you guys are still enjoying this game. Hope you have questions or comments or concerns for us because we'd love to start building our community and talking with you guys. We're loving the game, and I don't see that falling off anytime soon.
Yeah, I would love to hear what kind of quality of life things people are, looking for. I'd love to kind of compile a list of quality of life requests or complaints, that kind of thing. Not to like do anything with it, but just to understand the pain points about the game. That way we can hopefully, find things to speak towards that and find ways to reduce people's pain. And find things to track so that when updates come out, we have a list of these are the things we were hoping they would do and what did they do. All right, cool. Well, thanks for watching this video, folks. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you in episode 4 of Warcraft Rumblers. With that, we are out. Rumble on, etc.
Rumble on!
Oh, that was good. I like that. That sounded nice. All right, see you, folks.